Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being at the Delaware County Sustainability Commission meeting. We're thrilled to have you all here. And I'm going to share my screen to get started with the agenda. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the welcome, roll call, and interactive question. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment. And I will do the roll call. So when you hear your name, please say here or present. Steve Clark.
Here.
Jacqueline Rhodes. Scott Sidlow.
I am here.
Thank you. Jenny Perry Sachs.
I'm here.
Thank you. David Director.
I'm here.
Thank you. Sean Stansel.
Here.
Julie Prey.
Here.
Oh, great.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm
thank
on
you.
I'm on the phone.
Oh, thank you. Cephas Hales Richardson. Crystal Gauld. Francine Locke.
Here.
Ed Warner. Oh, he's not here, right? Ed Warner.
No.
Mark Manfrey.
No.
Gina Burrett.
Here.
Thank you. Jim Warner.
Here.
Thank you. Ed McGargy.
Here.
Becca Yurkovich.
Here.
And then Laura is not here. Okay. So now we will do the interactive question.
Carol, while you're pulling that up, just to share, so in Mark's place today, we do have Ann Stauffer. She's currently in our planning department and will be transitioning to the Deputy Director of Parks and Rec this May. So welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Becca. Hello, everyone.
And Ann is in place of whom? Sorry.
It's
She's
a new-
attending on Mark's behalf.
Oh, Mark's behalf. Sorry. Okay, great. All right. I'm just going to put that. I want to make sure I record that. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So now we have the interactive question. So what you should do is either go to your phones or open another browser on your computer. So what you want to do is go to www.menti.com, and the code is 37296335. Again, www.menti.com, and the code is 37296335. And the question is, what aspect of equity is most important to address in sustainability? I know that's like a really, really deep, important question. Let's see. So one answer, someone answered a resource allocation. Yes, resource allocation for sure. Access to clean air and clean water. Yeah, if all of us should have equal access to clean water and clean air, obviously. Let's see, outreach, how to engage communities and gain trust for sure. We want to make sure that everyone has access to participating in this process. Removing barriers that stand in the way of some communities having access to a healthy environment for sure. We should all have access to healthy food, healthy, nutritious food, clean air and clean water. It shouldn't matter where we live or anything. None of the aspects of being from a marginalized group should impact equity. Like we all should have access to those things. Human welfare, respect for historical inequities. These are amazing answers. and I know we're all working on these things, equal access to vital needs, clean air, food, and access to information. And that too, access to information is important. Access to public transportation, ensuring that no communities are more vulnerable to the effects of climate change than others. That's very important. Shade and street trees in underserved neighborhoods. Definitely. So thank you for these answers. I'm not sure if anyone is including any other answers, but oh, here's another one. Ensuring a bottom-up decision-making process and providing appropriate funding to accomplish equitable resource allocation. These are really, really important answers. Good food, safe streets, and clean environment. Yes. And as other people may be contributing their answers, I think what I'll do is I will save this and send it to Becca and Francine afterward, because I think these are like really, really important answers, and we always want to have this in mind with the work that we're doing. So, okay, it looks like there may not be anyone else contributing an answer. So thank you for these answers. And these are really important. And I appreciate working with you all on sustainability, knowing that we're rooted in this. So I'll stop sharing really quickly, and then I'll go back to the agenda. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is instructions for public comment. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a moment so I can read to you the instructions for public comment. Throughout the meeting, we will be providing the opportunity for residents and guests to provide comments or feedback, during which time comments may be submitted by the following. Number 1, guests may submit written comment to the email sustaindelco@co.delaware.pa.us. So again, that email address is sustaindelco@co.delaware.pa.us. Guests may also provide written comment in the chat window of the Zoom meeting. Finally, guests may hit the raise hand function during a period of public comment, in which they will have the opportunity to speak using their camera and microphone. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from March. So here are the meeting minutes from March, and those were emailed out to you. Does anyone need any additional time to read the meeting minutes? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Like to move, we approve them.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that, Ed McGargy.
Okay, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so moved. The meeting minutes for March are approved. The next item on the agenda is the Chief Sustainability Officer update with Francine Locke.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to grab my PowerPoint here and start. So nice to see everybody on this beautiful day. So just want to share that we had a Friday field trip today. It was at the Linville Farm, which is the Linville Orchard. This just occurred, so please bear with me. I'm kind of exhausted now. It was a really wonderful trip though, because the EPA grant application that we worked on really had me diving deep into conceptual composting facilities. This was a real composting facility. So we had My Kitchen Harvest composting site with Mother Compost. Gwen right there, Gwen Nolan, I think is her last name. She was kind enough to spend time with us and walk through. And the sustainability director from Chester County was with me, Rachel Griffin. She's in the middle, and a couple of other folks from Chester County. It was a really awesome experience to see firsthand what a composting facility can be. And it was run beautifully. There was barely an odor there. They're a success story. We had a Rose Tree Park Destination Playground groundbreaking this month, and it was so exciting to see this project kick off. It's going to be a really awesome playground for folks, and we are also going to have an electrical upgrade, and we're going to have EV charging stations installed there. Just some things that we're doing in the Delaware County Office of Sustainability with Becca and myself. Right now, we're kicking off the budget season again. It seems like as soon as we end the first budget season, it's time for the next. So we're into the second quarter of this year. And we go by the calendar year in Delaware County. So the 6 departments that report to the Office of Sustainability work with our sustainability finance director, and she is trying to put these things together. So Gina is on here. She's our director of planning. Ed McGargy is the director of conservation district. We're working with Mark and all those different departments. That's going to start soon, as well as the Capital Improvement Program Steering Committee. We just contracted with a graphic designer to bring our sustainability plan content to life. It's WFG Studios, and they're in Center City, Philadelphia. It's a women-owned business, and we're really looking forward to working with them. We signed a contract with Alex Danovich's firm, who was part of the Zero Waste Consulting Group for the pilot program for the Courthouse and Government Center, so we can start composting the food scraps in the cafeteria, really recycling and reducing our waste. And Gretchen Grobel is on the phone, on the Zoom call today at our meeting. We are really fortunate to have been able to identify her and at just the right time. So she's going to work on our fundraising strategy, which is a big deal. Gretchen, do you want to introduce yourself? I'll stop sharing for a second. Oops.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be working with Francine and Delaware County. For the past 9 years, I've been the executive director at Radnor Conservancy, a very small environmental nonprofit whose purview is Radnor Township. So I'm ready for some new challenges, and I'm really excited to be working with you all. So thank you, and I'm sure I'll reach out when I have questions. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Gretchen, very much. We appreciate you being with us, and we're looking forward to this journey towards fundraising for our sustainability plan, because as you'll see through this presentation, we have a lot of things to fundraise for. We're going to go through each of the action items in this presentation. So today, Becca and I also attended a workshop along with 2 of our elected officials, Dr. Taylor and Christine Ruther, as well as our deputy solicitor. If you remember, we talked about the RPPA in the past. Well, we've now changed the title of this to the Sustainable Energy Partnership of Southeast Pennsylvania. And we had a workshop today that was about 2 hours long. And if this was an attempt to try to share with our elected officials from Chester, Bucks, Montgomery, and Delaware counties what this is all about, which is procuring energy together, leveraging the power of our purchasing, and trying to get renewable energy at the greatest value. So there will be more to come as we share how we move forward with this. Sorry. Okay, so something really cool happened in March, and Gina Burrett, who's here, our planning director, is going to be presenting to council at our next council's public meeting, to show that we just got $1.24 million from the state for a bunch of projects that are related to sustainability. So a bike share feasibility study award, Vision Zero plan, which we already had some ARPA funding for, but now we can offset that ARPA funding and use it for something else and use this money. A tree canopy analysis. We're going to have a tree canopy study in Delaware County, which is something that's in our sustainability plan as an action, and now we have funding for it. So that's an exciting project. If you look at Philadelphia's tree vitalization study, you'll see what that's all about. And active transport, meaning how are we going to have people walking, biking, and not driving in their cars by themselves, doing a study for that. Trying to secure our Woodburn Mansion at Little Flower Park, which is really falling apart, unfortunately. So we're trying to decide what to do with that. Chester Creek Trail Phase 4 feasibility study, and Mineral Hill Park improvements. But I just wanted to share with you guys that the state is sharing this money. There's so much money. If you remember last year, we talked about this flurry of last minute funding opportunities, and we applied and we got the money. So woohoo! It's always fun to share that. Also, we presented to the Delaware County Interactive Gaming Revenue Authority a proposal showing our conference details, and they contributed $20,000 to our conference. So as you know, the conference is at Widener University, so we had expenses for catering and for audiovisual and other things. But Widener did contribute the venue to us, but we are making sure that we are providing breakfast, lunch, and a snack to our guests of about 400 people. And so this helps to cover some of that. And it's vegan and zero waste. So this is a little bit more about our conference as we've been sharing at every one of our monthly meetings, but just want to show you now we have a visual. This is our flyer. If you haven't already registered, please do so. Here is the Eventbrite link, and we will be sending this link out to all of the Sustainability Commission members individually, because we definitely want you to participate in the event if you're able to maybe facilitate or facilitate a conversation. I'm going to go into the panel discussions in a minute that we're hoping to have. So last year, these are some photos from last year. It was such a fun event. This year, our keynote speaker once again is Justin J. Harris from the Climate Equity Collaborative. The next speaker is Dr. Peter DiCarlo from Johns Hopkins, who's going to share his air research studies in environmental justice communities in Delaware County. Dr. Lloyd Baston is actually a Widener University professor, and he's going to talk about green chemistry. And as I mentioned last month, he makes it really interesting because he thinks it's the answer to sustainability, because when you generate waste, green chemistry can help prevent that and make it less toxic. And so you have to attend that session to hear how awesome it is. And then we have another speaker we haven't decided yet. So I'd like to know if you guys have any ideas. Of course, we're trying to cover the 6 focus areas of our sustainability plan. So if you guys have any thoughts on a potential speaker, please share with Becca and myself. And just want to show the confirmed panelists so far, and I'll talk about what the panel discussions are next, but we have Adam Ortiz, the EPA Region 3 Administrator, who's been confirmed to participate in a panel discussion, which is a kind of a big deal for anybody who's into environmental regulatory compliance. He's the big cheese in Region 3. Justin Dula, who is a friend of all of ours from Delaware County. He's the Director of Environmental Justice for Department of Environmental Protection from Pennsylvania. Ariella Marin, she's the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission new director. She's bringing such new energy and life into the Planning Commission. So she's going to be part of a panel discussion. Gamal Sharif, who is the mayor of Rutledge Borough in Delaware County. Frances Sheehan, who is from the foundation. She's the president of the Foundation of Delaware County. And these are just a bunch of the folks. I don't have to name all of them, but we're really excited. So the panel discussions that we'd like to have are this public-private partnership and leveraging resources for sustainability in underserved communities. And so Gina is kind enough to be the moderator of this particular panel. And so we're going to find that hopefully that will be a really interesting conversation. The next is organizational leaders implementing sustainability features into their organizational culture. So these are private businesses as well as nonprofits who provide resources, and so that's going to be interesting. The environmental health justice and sustainability, air quality interventions. So this is actually when Dr. DiCarlo presents his findings from his research, we're going to break out into this panel discussion with folks who are going to then ask questions about, okay, so this is your research. These are your scientific findings. What does it mean to us? And how can we make things better? So that should be an interesting conversation too. So I wanted to share these panel discussions with you. We have a bunch of Earth Day events that are happening. I mentioned them at our last meeting, some of these. So the Redwood Community Center is hosting a Planting a Kitchen Garden with Penn State Master Gardeners, hosted by Parks and Rec, COSA, Penn State Extension, and PRC. This is for seniors. So if you know any seniors who would like to sign up for this, you can go to the Delaware County website under Parks and Recreation, and there should be a link for that. The Marist Grove presentation Becca is going to be giving to share our sustainability work. We're having a Clayton Park cleanup and tree planting that Becca has been organizing, and we are asking for everybody's, all of our Sustainability Commission members and our county staff members to sign up for this. And Smedley Park, this is Ed McGargy's work with the Smedley Park Water Quality Basin Naturalization of the Basin with the Master Watershed Program folks. And in May, we're actually having a couple things. Senator Carney and Rep. O'Mara, they're having a renewable energy environmental expo at Smedley Park, one of our parks. We'll share links to registration on our website and our social media sites, actually. We'll post them. We're doing the campaign sign recycling event again, this time at Rose Tree Park. So we're going to try to get the word out that anybody who's running for office, their folks should pick up all of the signs afterwards, those metal post signs with the plastic, and bring them to Rose Tree Park on May 16th, and we will have those recycled. Last year, we did a great job with collecting the metals, and we got money for the metal, and we recycled the plastic too at a facility. Becca and I will be at the Climate Change Preparedness Conference in Washington, DC on the 17th to the 23rd. And Penn State University Extension Master Gardeners Program is having a garden contest again, which is so neat. We'll be able to share with you the winners. But on May 19th, they're having the late spring flower gardens, summer flower gardens, June 23rd, and community and youth gardens on August 4th. I encourage you guys to take a look at this and encourage folks to submit their gardens for this award. Parks and Rec is having Upland Park and Redwood Center. We just mentioned the planting and kitchen garden program, but they are also doing some other work at Upland Park. But once again, you can go to their website and find out more details about what's going on there. This Saturday is a really cool event that we want to attend, but Becca and I don't know if we're going to be able to, but Sean Rush is kind enough to have registered so we can capture this moment. Nature Under Your Nose, My Journey to Increasing Representation in Outdoor Spaces. This is at the Chester City Municipal Building Community Room, where we had one of our public meetings and our zero waste meeting last year. And so we encourage you to register for that really cool event. So thank you so much for listening.
Are there, and first of all, I'm just blown away. My gosh, that's amazing. The funding that we're getting and the conference and everything. Wow.
Thanks, Carol.
Definitely. Does anyone have any questions for Francine? Oh, Steve, are you clapping?
Yeah, that was just an electronic clap.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, Carol, one thing, I put it in the chat, but one other thing to remember for Earth Day is the household hazardous waste collection that's going on. It's down at the Emergency Services Training Center in Sharon Hill on Calkin Hill Road. And registration is required for that. Just it seems to space things out a lot better, and it eliminates the wait times that we used to have sitting in line. So I think that's a great thing. But you do need to register for it. It's free.
Just FYI, there's already 500 people signed up for that.
Oh my
And
goodness.
Wow.
I think we cut it off at, I'm not sure of this, but something around 6:25. So
Wow.
That's awesome, Jim. That's amazing.
Wow.
Is that calendar listed anywhere? Is that calendar listed anywhere?
We're
yeah,
going to be
it's-
posting
it's-
it on our Twitter. Like, I know that we're scheduling to have that posted, the link to, we just discussed this yesterday, and I inadvertently didn't include it in this slide. David, thank you for mentioning it, because it
Yeah.
really is a very important event.
It's
Yeah,
on,
it's,
can I answer his question? It's on our website. Okay, so just go to dalcoswa.org.
Becca
I'm
just
sorry,
put
I
it in
meant
the
the
chat.
whole calendar that Francine provided, all those events.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about HHW.
We're gonna be posting those on our social media for this upcoming week. So we'll probably post over the weekend. But I can be sure to send it to you guys directly as well.
Thank you.
No? Any other questions or comments for Francine? Okay, hearing none, I'll share my screen. We'll go on to the next item on the agenda. Oh, actually, the next item is public comment. Is there any public comment?
Becca, are you saying something?
Yes. Sorry. We do have an email in our Sustain Delco from Alex McKinnon, who I do believe is on our call today. So they listed several years ago, Delaware County devised Delaware County Bicycle Plan to improve the county's road infrastructure to make it safer and more friendly toward bicycles. The plan prioritized a collection of high-use routes for cyclists in terms of primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of importance. As the county continues to make the community more accessible to cyclists, what data has the county collected so far on their bike lanes and on residents' satisfaction with bike lanes? If this data exists, does the county have a plan to act on the data to further expand the number of safe bike lanes within the county? Thank you. Alex, I'm going to ask that you hold tight until we go through our sustainability plan a little bit later in the agenda, as we will be talking about this exact matter. But if you have further comments, please feel free to jump in a little bit later.
Okay, any other public comment? Okay, hearing none. I'll share my screen again to go to the next item on the agenda. So the next item on the agenda is the 10-year municipal solid waste plan update with Becca.
So same update as last month. So Alex and Ruth are still awaiting the finalized life cycle analysis. They're working with a PhD on running that data. And pretty much what they're looking at is they're running the life cycle analysis on our kind of business as usual approach, as well as the potential of moving away from the incinerator. But that's everything. And I apologize, I'm going to step away and close my door.
Okay, thank you, Becca. We'll go into the next item on the agenda. Ooh, well, it's both Becca and Francine. The sustainability plan review.
So Becca's going to share her screen and we're going to share this presentation together.
I apologize, they started leaf blowing right below my window.
Right, so we're excited to share with you the past 2 years worth of getting information from our stakeholders, our staff members, our Sustainability Commission, and what is going to be in our sustainability plan. This is a really exciting time. And Becca put in so much time with subcommittees over the past several months, and this is the fruit of our labor. Let's go. So we're going to talk about the mission of our plan and basically Delaware County's Office of Sustainability and this plan, the 4 guiding principles, the focus areas, our primary goals, sub-goals and targets, actions, our public engagement findings, strategy for implementation, and then next steps. So this is the mission of Delaware County's Office of Sustainability, and it is exactly what this plan is attempting to do. We're trying to create a sustainable and resilient Delaware County that protects the most vulnerable residents from the impacts of climate change and supports a robust green economy while protecting and preserving our natural resources. As you know, the most vulnerable residents are our seniors, our youngest children, immunocompromised individuals, people from low-income communities who don't have the resources that others do, marginalized communities. We want to make sure everyone has access. I'm sorry, Becca. So, you know, we started this a while ago, and the sustainability subcommittees that we conducted the meetings, they all agreed upon 4 guiding principles. These are the values that will run through our sustainability plan and should be touched upon in all of the actions that we're taking. We want to ensure economic sustainability for Delaware County. We want to provide education, make sure everyone is informed and educated about the sustainability issues in our county and how we want to solve them, and climate change and resiliency. We want to ensure that we're properly governing as a county. So the governance of this plan is really important. So how are we going to do that equitably, fairly? So the 4th is equity, inclusion, and justice. So these are the 4 guiding principles that are the spirit, and they flow through everything in this plan. So you should see that as we move forward. And our 6 focus areas, as we've been talking about for a while now, and we're going to get into some serious details, so please bear with us, and hopefully you'll really enjoy this conversation. Climate resiliency, natural resources, transportation, energy and efficiency, zero waste, and health and wellness. And they're not in any particular order. We want to make sure that's clear, even though they are numbered as we move forward. So this is really, this one slide, we have a slide like this for each one of the focus areas, and it was put together with so much time, effort, compassion, and passion and effort. I just want you to know that this took a long time to put together with a lot of input. So the overarching goal for the focus area of climate resiliency is to prepare Delaware County to withstand and recover quickly from the effects of climate change. We want to be prepared. And so the three subcategories here are natural hazards, economy, and infrastructure. When we're talking about natural hazards, we're talking about the flooding, the extreme heat and humidity, the longer summers, the things that are naturally occurring as a result of climate change. And so the goal for this in this area of natural resources is to equip Delaware County to be more prepared to combat extreme weather events. So that's what we're really focusing on in that subcategory. And the specific target that we will be measuring over the next 5 years is we want to increase the number of communities that adopt and implement resiliency practices to prepare for and respond to climate hazards. That's what we're going to be tracking. So when we report out annually, this will be something that we want to make sure we can say easily. This is how many communities we know have adopted and implemented resiliency practices. The next category is economy. We want to make sure that we can grow and diversify the green economy. Even though we're dealing with the impacts of climate change, we want to make sure we're still growing an economy that is sustainable. And so the target is increase the number of green jobs and businesses in Delaware County by 5% over the next 5 years. And so we need to define what a green job is. We need to define what a green business is. And we have a good understanding of that. And over the next 5 years, we hope to have that baseline information that we can move forward from. So the last subcategory under climate resiliency is infrastructure. Of course, infrastructure is affected by these weather events that we're having, the natural hazards. And so the goal is to ensure infrastructure is properly constructed and maintained to withstand climate hazards through informed decisions by our municipalities and residents. Now, of course, Delaware County does not have the ability to control all of the infrastructure in the county. So that's why our target is to increase awareness and understanding of sustainable infrastructure by engaging all 49 municipalities and their residents over the next 5 years. That's what we will be measuring and sharing out. Becca is going to go on now, and this is going to be the pattern as we move forward through these focus areas. Becca is going to show you how we plan to actually implement this through action. Becca?
Sure. So I apologize because these are probably the most writing you will ever see on a slide in your life. But these are all of the actions of our plan. And as Fran noted, so we recognize that those 240 actions, that's a lot. But as we've stated before, the whole point is that we have very specific actions that are a to-do list. So we know when they're done, we know when they're completed, and can easily check them off. So start off in climate resiliency when looking at the natural hazards piece that Fran mentioned. So looking at the resiliency of our residents when it comes to natural hazards, there are kind of 4 main categories of actions. So first and foremost is the defining of climate hazards and identifying the highest risk areas in Delaware County. So the actions you'll see under this area are really setting those baselines so we can really channel our resources to where the greatest needs are. The next area is then building better emergency plans for when extreme weather hits. So as many of you know, Delaware County has a hazard management plan as it currently stands, but we've recognized through this process that there's some need for more defined action and some larger scale plans, such as our heat and cold weather plans, which are currently only catered toward seniors in our county. So after having more better plans, we're also looking to properly establish funding and staffing to ensure that we are not only responding properly during these events, but also doing mitigation efforts ahead of time. So as of right now, as we learned through our process, the county does not receive mitigation funding unless it is a direct result of a disaster. So that's a huge problem that we had recognized through this process and had set actions of establishing some budget ahead of disaster so we can really work on mitigating impacts. And finally, the last piece in terms of natural hazards was increasing the education and preparedness of our municipalities and our residents. So through training and widespread interventions, really going through and preparing the communities more readily. So in terms of green economy, there are three main things that we had to do in this area as well. So first and foremost, we have to define green jobs and understand what the current job offerings are. Through our subcommittee process, we learned the importance of not being too quick to define green jobs in this process, as we have to ensure that our definition is in alignment with regional, state, and federal definitions to ensure that we're not getting disqualified for federal funding or any funding in terms of workforce development. We were assured that this is an effort that's currently ongoing with our workforce development office, but that's kind of why we have to start at the very beginning in this section. So next, we also recognized we need to recognize our existing businesses that are practicing sustainability now. So we looked at potential options for creating a recognition program and also doing some research about potential opportunities to incentivize. And finally, the last kind of broad section of strategies or actions are supporting new green businesses and jobs. So looking at how we can get new businesses that have a sustainable background to come into Delaware County, so there are more job offerings in those fields. And the last section of climate resiliency is again looking at that infrastructure that Fran noted. And we did it in 4 different strategies. So first we looked at how can we create resilient codes and communities. So how can we work with our municipalities to ensure that their building codes are promoting more resilient development? So that might be removing structures out of the floodplain or looking for other opportunities to incentivize developers to build more sustainable buildings. Next, we looked at promoting our existing resources and programs. So Delaware County has some really great resources already, including the Blight Demolition Fund, which allows you to have funding to take down unsafe structures through the Office of Housing and Community Development. Also educating municipalities and residents about the Delaware County Land Bank and the Act 135 process. Other actions we identified were protecting existing infrastructure through maintenance and relocation, so ensuring that the infrastructure that's already in place can also withstand these hazards. And finally, supporting smart development and construction into the future. So as we are building new infrastructure, how can we ensure that we're building structures that will be able to withstand future climate change conditions as well? And Fran, did you want time for question in between each section?
Sure. Yeah.
So we'll take a pause, and I apologize, that was a lot. Does anybody have comments, questions, or concerns about any of the identified actions, targets, or goals in our climate resiliency section?
Yeah, I'd like to just a comment here. I noticed that our target reductions and so on are very modest, and I think that's appropriate because this is a very long-term kind of an issue, the resiliency area in particular. And what we're doing at this point is just building a foundation. There is so much information gathering here and so on that what we're really doing at this point is creating a foundation for the next 5 years and the 5 years after it. And I think that we need to, that we should view this particular focus area through that lens.
I love that, David. This is the infrastructure we're creating for that, right? Through this plan.
Correct. This is the mathematical and data infrastructure we're creating.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments? Alrighty, then if not, we're gonna fast forward.
Just one question.
Go ahead,
What is
Steve.
Act 139 on your previous slide?
Oh, I knew you were gonna ask me that. So I'm going to defer to Laura Goodrich Cairns, who unfortunately is not here, but I know it's a land acquisition program in which the Commerce Center can acquire land for redevelopment. And it does that through a process, I believe, prior to properties going to a sheriff's sale. And it's to really reinvigorate the community before it kind of sits vacant for long periods of time. But I can, again,
That
touch
was
base with
good.
her to ensure that I
That was considering you said
collected
you
that
didn't know.
accurately.
That was a lot of information, considering you said you weren't sure. That was really good.
I know it's a process they use in tandem with the land bank.
Shari's asking a question.
Hi, I just wanted on the infrastructure. Sorry.
Again, touch base with her to ensure that I
That was considering you said that was a lot of information, considering you said you weren't sure. That was really good.
I know it's a process they use in tandem with the land bank. Are you there? I'm hearing the
Shari's
playback
asking a
of our
question.
meeting.
So I just wanted on the infrastructure.
Sorry. All right, so that got weird. Becca, are you?
Shari, yeah, Shari, while you figure that out, I'm gonna defer to Christine Ruther. I think she has a question as well, and then we'll come back after your audio is set. Councilwoman Schaefer or Ruther, did you have a comment?
It's in the chat box too.
Sure. So is the sustainability and planning team connected with the emergency services department and its municipal network of on the climate hazards? Yes. So through our focus area meetings over the past 8 months, Larry.
Hi,
Bach-
yeah, this is, can you hear me okay? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
No,
I can hear
okay.
you.
It's in the chat box too. So I think we're getting the feedback that that's really, it might be coming from Councilmember Ruther, but if you can hear us, we can answer your question because we did read it.
Yeah, so in regards to was the emergency services department involved? So as you know, we had focus area subcommittees meet over the past 8 months to establish or create these lists of goals, targets, and actions. And we did have Larry Bach from the emergency services department actively working on that group and providing feedback as to their existing needs, as well as their existing programs. And with that commitment, it's recognized that and they're in support of implementing a lot of these actions in the climate hazards area. Hope that answers your question. And
I think it did, Becca, hopefully.
okay.
Yeah.
And then Shari in the chat, on the infrastructure slide, I just wanted to be sure that redevelopment can mean redeveloping as green space and not only new buildings. Yes, and that, so Shari's referencing number 58, so supporting redevelopment of vacant and underutilized land and properties. This is a action that we identified in tandem with the Commerce Center that has established this goal in their like comprehensive plan moving forward. And if that clarification is needed to recognize that we don't just mean building more buildings, we'd be happy to make that amendment. And Councilwoman Ruther also shared that on infrastructure, to the prior comment, the goal of the land bank and the guardianship program is to restore property to tax rolls. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments in terms of our climate resiliency section?
Just one comment or maybe a question. It seems like a lot of these key definitions are not defined yet. I mean, I've heard it said a couple times when you said it. I mean, it seems like we're a couple years into this. Trying to think of a specific example, but never mind.
I think your point's right, Steve, though. We have not put the definitions of a lot of terms here yet. So this
Real
is
important stuff, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do that. So we do have a strategy in which we hope to be able to provide a listing of all the definitions that are not normal terms, things that are kind of technical or difficult to just understand from looking at them here. People may not understand what the land bank is. We'll have references to that. So thank you for stating that. That's a very good point. We don't want to just throw information at people and not have any explanation. Some of these things are unusual.
Alrighty, so we'll keep moving, but again, we'll have time, so at the end as well for any other broader questions if you think of something a little bit later. So I'm going to pass it back to Fran for natural resources.
Thank you so much. Just want to note that Sean Rush put in the chat box that if you're listening to the YouTube live stream and you're also on the device with the Zoom call, that's could cause a problem that we heard earlier. So focus area number 2, once again, this is the culmination of months of planning and getting feedback from folks. So we're really excited about focus area number 2, natural resources. The overarching goal of this section is to protect, conserve, and restore natural resources in Delaware County. And some of those natural resources, as Steve said, we will define what they are in the plan in depth so that we can have a clear understanding of what do you mean by natural resources. We're going to give the listing of what that is. But the subcategories kind of elaborate a little bit. So open space is a natural resource. And the goal is to increase the amount of and accessibility to open space for all Delaware County residents. The specific target for this is what we're going to measure over 5 years is we want to know, number 1, are we increasing the number of acres of protected open space? And we want to do that by 10% over 5 years. So the plan is going to have a baseline of how many acres of open space do we have presently, and we're going to see how we grow from there over the next 5 years. The second target for this open space subcategory is to increase the number of residents within a half-mile walk of public open space by 10% over 5 years. And so the interventions that could be in place, Becca is going to go over them, but we could perhaps say, a trail has been constructed that allows people to walk. But Becca is going to go over those specific actions as we move forward. The subcategory for natural resources, tree canopy and plantings. That's a natural resource. We want to increase native trees, tree canopies, and natural plantings. That action that I mentioned earlier on in the CSO update that showed that we got grant money for a tree canopy study feeds into this particular item, showing we are taking action here. The target for this subcategory is we'd like to increase the total tree canopy area by 10% over 5 years. And we also have the target of we want to remediate and enhance 250 acres with native plantings in Delaware County in the next 5 years. Now, mind you, all of this will require us to have baseline data. The tree canopy study is going to help us with that. So the third subcategory in the natural resources focus area is watershed quality. Let me see. So the goal for the watershed quality subcategory is to improve the quality of watersheds throughout Delaware County. And as you may know, our watershed is actually not in very good condition in terms of contaminant levels. And the sustainability plan, we're going to give some background information on what that means, how we're exceeding some standards that we shouldn't be. So the target for this is to increase the implementation of best management practices by 10% over the next 5 years so that we can improve the water quality of our watershed. The fourth subcategory in this natural resources focus area is brownfields. And Ann Stauffer is actually with us today, and she was responsible for conducting a brownfield study in Upper Darby, which was a very cool starting point for us. So we want to also identify brownfields in Delaware County throughout the county and increase remediation efforts. So that's our goal for this section of natural resources in brownfields. We want to identify them and we want to remediate them. And the specific target is we want to complete a brownfield survey in all 49 Delaware County municipalities over the next 5 years. So in 1 year, when we report out to you on this particular focus area, we're going to have information for each one of those targets to report out on. Becca's going to take it from here and give you specifics.
Thanks, Francine. So first we're looking at open space. And if you're curious about the T1 or T2, that's just referring to which target these strategies are directly corresponding with. So first looking at our first target, which is increasing the actual amount of open space. So first looking at understanding our current open space offerings and then setting the priorities. So as Fran mentioned, this is really looking at our baseline and having a greater understanding of where our largest needs are. We also recognize through our subcommittee process that it can be a tricky situation to identify particular parcels for prioritization, just because that can often scare some folks off if they see their property listed on a high priority for preservation. So one way we've identified to get around that, but still put in the effort to recognize where our high priority areas are, can be seen in number 8 up at the top. So creating a criteria for open space prioritization and recognizing the different needs and characteristics to look for in different classes of municipalities. So what this would mean is identifying what are those characteristics that we value the most and want to protect in particular parcels, and really breaking that down of, hey, what does that mean in a township versus a borough versus a city? Because, for example, historically, a standard has always been, 10 acres. But we recognize that 10 acres of open space in our borough may not be realistic. So boroughs should be going after maybe a ½ acre or an acre instead. Next would be providing the education and technical assistance. So after we create that criteria, then going back to municipalities and other groups to say, hey, these are some of the priorities or key things that we've identified that you should be looking for in parcels in your community for preservation or for conservation. This would also allow for us to help create models and encourage adoption of ordinances which require open space for conservation alongside new development. The third large strategy is increasing resources and capacity building. So as many of you know, we currently have the Greenways Grant Program, which helps designate funding for municipalities to either acquire open space, enhance, or build trails. So it's looking to expand that program while also meeting capacity needs in other ways. And then the most straightforward way of increasing open space would be for the county to acquire additional open space. So in addition to the actual acquisition, we're also looking about how we can expand the accessibility or the actual use of our open spaces. So the actions under understanding the community's current access and comfort in using parks really addresses us speaking with the public and speaking with the members of our community to see what their current level and usage is of our open spaces. And from that data, we would be able to make more clear plans to address barriers that our community members are facing in utilizing open space in the county. So next, the next sub goal was tree canopy and native plantings. So first and foremost, we're looking to create or complete the tree canopy study, looking at existing tree cover and identifying need areas. So as Fran noted, we're very thankful to state that we actually have funding to complete this area of actions. And it really lays a pivotal groundwork for identifying need areas in the county. Next, we would then be providing data and technical assistance for community implementation. So once we have this study done, it's then really doing the outreach in our communities to say, hey, this is what we found. How can we help you implement some strategies to get more native plants and trees in these areas of your community? Next, we also recognize these two areas of strategies go hand in hand with the remediation of natural lands that Fran explained as our second target. So this would be looking at creating natural landscapes with native plants through invasive species management, as well as naturalized meadows and county parks. And then finally, building community capacity through technical assistance and information sharing. So how can we use our resources and expertise to then reach out and make an impact in these areas in the community as well? Next is the watershed quality. So we're looking to not only increase data collection and fostering conversations among communities. Through many of our conversations in this group, as well as our subcommittees, it was recognized that downstream communities and upstream communities often have different priorities and are not always talking to form one unified, plan for improving the water quality in their area. So in this area, it was really looking to improve collaboration and awareness through all communities. Next, we were also looking to provide education and technical assistance to really work with our municipalities and other community groups to improve watershed quality. And then finally, our last set of actions are things that the county can do on its own properties to really lead by example. And then the last section is the brownfield remediation. And you'll note that there are only 2 actions in this area to start. So first is completing potential brownfield analyses for the entire county, as well as exploring the application to the EPA Brownfields job training. The reason for having kind of sparse action in this area is just recognizing the incredible amount of time and resources it takes to identify where brownfields are in the county. So for this next 5 years, it's really identifying where these sites are. So for the future, we can then move forward with remediation. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to comments. I see Jacqueline in the chat has recommended that we add actions somewhere to include pesticide-free zones, as well as recommend seeding and planting suitability for this zone. Those are great recommendations. And that's from Joe.
Let me mention something that came up last night at our EAC meeting. Sherry might want to talk some more about this as well, but there is a movement afoot to enact a companion amendment to the state constitution that protects an amendment that would protect the rights of the natural world, basically. Forgive me if I got it wrong, Sherry, but that would be a companion to the amendment that protects the rights of individuals, of people, to a clean environment. And we were talking about this and the idea of, for example, media is looking at trying to do something about mosquito spraying. And what our options may be there. And so this is a whole larger thing. And I think that we should, maybe look at the whole pesticide issue somewhere.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing about the Constitution update too. I wasn't aware of that.
I wasn't either until last night.
Any other thoughts or comments on any of the goals, targets, or identified actions in our natural resources section?
Jacqueline added that there are a lot of good recommendations for native plants in the area. I think in the plan, we could just link to that, maybe share the resources instead of actually listing all of them in the plan. But I think it's definitely an important thing to put in the plan, piece of information for folks.
Absolutely. Alrighty, then I'm going to pass it back to Fran to talk about transportation.
Thank you. So focus area number 3, transportation. The overarching goal of this section is to increase accessibility to safe, active, and multimodal transportation as alternatives to single occupant motor vehicles. This means we want people to walk more, we want people to bike more, we want people to not drive by themselves in a vehicle to work. And if they do that, use an electric vehicle, but still try not to. So that's the goal, and do it safely. And so the subcategories are walking infrastructure. We want to increase the walking infrastructure in Delaware County. It's very simple. Our target is increasing the miles of sidewalk and trails by 10% over 5 years. So we will report out on that with many interventions that Becca's going to talk about next. We want to increase our biking infrastructure. So that's the subcategory number 2 when it comes to multimodal transportation. The target is that we would like to increase the miles of bike lanes, safe bike routes and trails by 10% over 5 years, very similar to the walkability one. Transit ridership. We want to increase people using public transportation. And that target, we have 2 of them for this section. Number 1 is increase transit ridership in Delaware County by 20%. over 5 years. And we want to encourage behavior changes to include biking, walking, and use of public transit. So these are things we can influence and we can educate about. We can't necessarily control it. And so that's really important for everyone to realize when we do things like this, we are really relying upon our partners such as SEPTA. And so Becca will get into what the ideas are for implementation next. And then the fourth subcategory under focus area 3 transportation is EVs and EV infrastructure. So we want to support access to and adoption of electric vehicles and EV charging stations. The target is to increase the number of publicly accessible and county-owned charging stations throughout Delaware County by 20% over the next 5 years. Becca?
Sorry, couldn't find my unmute. So first in the section of walking, we recognize that if we're trying to encourage people to do this, we need to make sure that people can do it safely. So first, we want to have a better understanding of what our existing conditions are throughout the county. So this would really be a lot of baselining. So looking at our sidewalk inventory, which we have done in the past, just to make sure that that is completely up to date. Also ensuring that we're including street crossings, and then really getting into the analysis of where are those key gaps in our transportation, our walking transportation network. This would also include looking at our trail system and identifying key gaps in those trails as well. Next, after we have a good understanding of the basic conditions, it's then looking at how can we fill those gaps. So we would need to first identify funding sources for filling a lot of those gaps. Also working with municipalities, as there are often local constraints to sidewalk through zoning and other subdivision and land development codes. Then it would be also ensuring that as people are putting these in, that they are doing best practices for design. We would also want to make sure that we're making our walking safer and more efficient. So having better wayfinding, creating a Safe Routes to School program, which focuses directly on walking infrastructure around school buildings. And finally, creating a Vision Zero plan, which seeks to reduce and eliminate fatalities. And then finally, it's the focus on developing better sidewalks and trails. So looking at our specific design guidelines to ensure that we're promoting safe crossings and safe experiences for all as they're using our walking infrastructure. Next, in terms of biking, it's first and foremost, again, looking at our existing conditions. So as Alex asked in their question, it's identifying that baseline and updating an inventory for biking infrastructure. So at this time, we do not have a great inventory of bike routes, sharrows, and bike lanes throughout the county. Many of them have shifted since the report you referenced was created. So we want to ensure that we have an up-to-date inventory. Then, much like walking, we want to ensure that we're designing better bike facilities. So ensuring that key facilities and regional hubs have ample bike parking and storage, as well as design guidelines and standards for parking and other bike infrastructure. Next, we're also looking at getting local projects off the ground, so providing technical assistance in identifying potential projects. So as we're doing our analyses, just making sure, seeing where those gaps are, and then providing those recommendations and that data back to the key folks that have that kind of localized power to change some things. We also look to work with PICO and SEPTA to identify trails, easements for trail expansion, and again, key locations for bike lanes and sharrows to encourage municipalities to get involved, as PennDOT will often stripe these kind of facilities during repaving projects. And finally, we've recognized through our subcommittee process that installation is only part of the picture, and that maintaining this infrastructure is also very important. So we want to be able to ensure that we're providing best practices and technical assistance regarding maintenance strategies for keeping bike infrastructure safe. Next, looking at transit, in the first target, we're looking at how can we increase ridership. So first, we would like to do that background analysis of looking at how does Delco currently use transit. And then finally, we would be looking at designing communities for transit. So how can we incorporate transit-friendly development in our municipalities to promote that as a primary use of transportation? We would also be looking to incentivize the use of transit. Specifically in our realm of influence, this would be for folks who are coming to county facilities, but we would also be like to work with local businesses to see if they would be willing to provide incentives to employees or visitors who are using transit as well. In terms of behavior changes, we want to ensure that we're providing the right infrastructure for transportation alternatives. So very much like walking and biking, we want to make sure that the facilities that are in place ensure that people feel safe and comfortable taking public transit. And finally, we want to make sure that we're engaging with the community and understanding its needs. So really getting on the ground and talking to people about why they're choosing one mode of transportation over another and what improvements the county can be making to make some of these alternatives more favorable. Next, in the area of EVs, we recognize that there's still a lot of questions or I guess discomfort about EVs. So we want to ensure that we're increasing awareness and comfort with electric vehicles. So really promoting community education, as well as speaking to municipalities, businesses, and industry leaders to really learn the facts about electrification. Very similar to the others, we want to make sure that we have the necessary infrastructure for electric vehicles. So many of our actions are looking at installing additional EV charging stations, both for community and county use. Next is looking at acquiring actual electric vehicles, and this is specified specific for the county fleet. And finally, ensuring that our employees and other staff members are provided adequate training, not only for driving these cars, but also maintaining them for long-term use. And the last section of transportation is looking at our emissions. So it's understood that if you adopt any of the strategies from our previous slides in transportation, they're going to have impacts on our emissions, but also just looking at some other options for reducing emissions in this area. First would be looking at reducing trips and idling, so establishing policies to ensure our cars aren't sitting running if folks are using gas-powered vehicles. And finally, reducing the use of small combustion engines. So I know it doesn't seem like a mode of transportation, but in terms of kind of gas-powered emissions, also encouraging the transition away from kind of lawn equipment, tractors, and other gas-powered small combustion engines. So any questions or thoughts?
I had one about the first section, the sidewalks. And I'm wondering whether that 10% goal may be a little unachievable. And the reason I say that, and perhaps there's data to support it, and if there is, then I'm fine with it. But just thinking about the way we have sidewalks in the densely populated areas of the county, thinking about Upper Darby, where you have sidewalks everywhere. If you're looking at the total miles of sidewalks, I think you'll find that, you know, it's a pretty good coverage of the areas where we need them. I think that, and so, you know, trying to increase that by 10%, it may not be possible in any way. Perhaps there's a better way of measuring, maybe by the population served by the sidewalks, or something like that. But I hate to see us set up a target that really is basically undoable.
I greatly appreciate your comment. I know that this was a particularly tricky area in identifying a meaningful target that we could actually measure our success, because in identifying each of our targets, we wanted to ensure that it's something that would directly be influenced by Delaware County's efforts. So we recognize that that would be something that we could actively track. But I do agree with your sentiment that 10% in this area may be extremely difficult because a lot of our communities already have a great base for walking infrastructure. So we'll definitely look into that.
I just want to add that we're not afraid to not attain these targets. If we can't, we will say so. And in the next iteration, we'll perhaps adjust to a different metric if need be. But as Becca was saying, we do have the ability to have a baseline and measure progress over the next 5 years with this particular metric, this target. But we're not afraid of failure. I mean, unfortunately, that's going to happen. We may exceed some of our targets too. Just want to share.
Let me also suggest that, maybe one thing to look at is to identify, rather than identifying, well, we sort of have it, we have gaps. The barriers to walking, and then based on where those barriers are, look at the population that is impacted by each individual barrier and try to work with it from that point of view. That may be a bigger effort.
Is that in one of the studies? So that might be in one of the studies that we'll be taking. So the so the Vision Zero plan and the, Becca, is that true? And Gina, if you want to chime in, I know that there are studies being taken place that might have that information to come of it. Barriers.
I think there are certain plans we have, like you noted, so 19 and 20 that look at specific kinds of barriers. So for example, the Safe Routes to School is looking at the barriers of essentially school-age children walking to school. And then Vision Zero, it would be largely where pedestrians would be interacting with vehicles. So typically at intersections or in areas that don't have walking infrastructure. But to your point, maybe one thing that we can do is mirror kind of the transit section where we're actively making it an action to really survey people about why they're choosing transit or not choosing transit. So that could very easily be expanded to really ask people, hey, why do you feel unsafe walking?
Can I add something to this? Can I add something quickly? Also, like, we should think about like the last mile of like, trying to get someone from their starting point to their destination. There have been many times where I'll take public transportation somewhere and I get out of like, the train station that's like less than half a mile or a quarter of a mile from the destination and there are no sidewalks. So maybe we can focus on the transit stops and whether or not there is a way for people to walk from wherever the transit stops are to like whatever destinations are like near it, like almost like transit oriented development kind of thoughts there.
Yes, and we do have, sorry, I'm gonna move forward a little bit. We do have actions around transit oriented development. So in our designing communities for transit, we have support and provide guidance on transit oriented development in Delaware County. But again, just ensuring that we're looking at that last mile totally makes sense.
I'll just note that the active transportation plan, which was one of the grants that we just received to do that plan, it's very focused on sort of that last mile, on the gaps in sidewalks, on biking, all of that. So that will be something that we will, as part of that plan, be documenting what kind of exists and what needs to be done and how can we make those last mile connections.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jean.
That is so cool. And just want to remind everybody, we're trying to share a lot of information with you. There's a lot of details that you will see in the actual plan. There's a narrative portion to this plan that we're not sharing with you yet because it's just too much. But the narrative, we're trying to share background information, but please continue asking these questions because, we want to share as much as we can today.
So any other thoughts or questions on transportation?
There's something in the chat. I think Gretchen started out, she made a point that there is an opportunity to share environmental best practices as a model for the county and ultimately all the municipalities. And Joe said, rolling out an easily achievable, so this is from the prior focus area, but it applies to all of them really. Rolling out an easily achievable best practice, like for example, replacing some percentage of lawns with a meadow comprised of native plants that favors birds and bees. So I think the overall thought is, and I think we are doing this, we're trying to identify those best practices in the plan as we move forward. We may not be naming them today here, but anytime, so the subcommittees that met to create this information we're sharing today explored all the different guidelines, standards, laws, practices that are being implemented right now. Plans that the Delaware County Planning Commission, the Delaware County Planning Department has already issued sample plans. So there is a lot of information that's going to be in this document that hopefully covers all of that. Becca, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I think a lot of it's also, I think one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, which is also worth sharing, is recognizing that Delaware County or the Office of Sustainability is not necessarily the only entity or the lead entity implementing all of these actions. So in the comment for best practices for meadows or things like that. Throughout our process, we worked with a lot of different organizations such as Penn State Extension or PennDOT or PICO or many others. And through this process, many of those representatives committed to being the lead agency on some of these. So recognizing that we may not be the expert in all of these areas, but it's still identified in the plan as something that's important for moving Delaware County toward a more sustainable future. And how we'll be approaching that is we're doing annual reports and we'll be checking in with those agencies that volunteered themselves as the lead to ensure that they are moving forward. So just one other thing to share kind of as we're going through all of these actions.
That is so important, actually, Becca. I think that we emphasize that the subcommittees by design and very intentionally, we ensured that there were individuals who were stakeholders and resource providers included in the discussion of our actions, because as Becca said, we can't do it alone as Delaware County. So in addition to, we're going to go at the end of this talk about an implementation strategy.
Wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward to the next section then, which is energy and efficiencies.
So I'll try to be as efficient as possible with this one. So focus area number 4, we're focusing on energy and efficiencies. The overarching goal is we want to reduce energy and water consumption in buildings and properties throughout Delaware County. And we want to transition to combustion-free renewable energy. And so the subcategories, number 1, of course, is energy. The goal is to reduce energy consumption in Delaware County. There are 2 targets. They are focused on our county-owned buildings and then residential facilities and homes. We want to reduce our energy consumption in county buildings and in residential homes by 20% over the 20% over the next 5 years, commercial buildings, residential, and county owned. So we can control the county owned buildings. And that is where we will be able to really have major action. And Becca's going to discuss those specific actions there. And so the second subcategory is water. We want to stop using so much water. We want to stop consuming water. So the first target is to reduce water consumption in our county buildings once again, and reducing water consumption in commercial and residential buildings, and reducing that by 20% over the next 5 years. And we're really fortunate because we will be able to clearly report out operationally our energy consumption from our PICO bills and our Aqua bills in our buildings. So we will have some very accurate information to share baseline and moving forward what that looks like over the next 5 years based upon the interventions we're doing. It's a little more challenging with regards to monitoring and tracking residential and commercial buildings, but we are able to do it. And so that's something that should be interesting to see. Renewable energy. This is what I was discussing in the CSO update. We have a group of inter-county sustainability folks who are working together with the DVRPC to come up with a way for us to leverage the power of partnership and have renewable energy sources at the best value to our counties. So the goal here is to increase availability and use of combustion-free renewable energy sources. There are not many regional or local sources of that: wind power, solar power. And so as we move forward, we're trying to make those more readily available to Delaware County and its residents and businesses. We also are a member of the PJMCCC, and we are trying to actually influence the grid so that we have more of that available to us in the infrastructure world with the supply and the generation and supply. So the two targets for renewable energy, number one is increase locally sourced renewable energy infrastructure in county buildings by 10% over the next 5 years, and increase locally sourced renewable for residential, commercial, and industrial by 10% over the next 5 years. So we're going to track where we are seeing new infrastructure come into light for solar and wind. And that's a challenging situation because we don't necessarily control that other than when we put solar panels on our buildings. And we do have projects in the pipework, so we will be able to report out on that. Emissions, reduce emissions in Delaware County. Of course, emissions are associated with the generation of energy. In fact, that is the #1 source of emissions for most urban environments, including Delaware County, even though we are suburban, but for our county, the #1 source of emissions is our buildings, same as Philadelphia. So we want to reduce those. And the target is to reduce scope 1 and 2 emissions by 20% compared to the 2019 baseline over the next 5 years. I'm going to move back.
Thank you, Fran. So first looking at our energy, first we recognize we need to have data collection and have really strong baselines to ensure that we are tracking long-term the impact our actions are taking. So in the area of energy, we're seeking to create or collect baseline energy data, as well as auditing our bills to ensure that we're being billed correctly, and assigning Energy Star scores to our buildings. Next, we're looking to create new standards. So we have done a facilities conditions and needs assessment previously, which sought to do a lot of these actions. But we recognize that submetering is currently a problem in county buildings, recognizing that we'll have 18 buildings on 1 meter, which makes it incredibly difficult for us to identify where the biggest, change needs to occur. So we're looking to change that. Next is looking to implement energy conservation measures. So really implementing design and construction in county buildings, also seeking energy saving projects. Finally, we're looking to make data accessible and increase staff education. So really ensuring that our staff of the county also knows what they can do to reduce energy usage. In terms of our community, we're first looking to do community education. So providing education to community groups, residents, municipalities, and businesses around the existing programs and incentives that exist for energy reduction or energy consumption reduction. We're also looking to increase the use of existing programs. So there are some really great programs already out there seeking to do exactly this goal. So we're really going to ensure that the county is making those resources available and easy to find for our residents and businesses. And finally, we're also exploring potential for energy benchmarking on a regional scale. So this is a program in the city of Philadelphia currently, where buildings over a certain size have to report their energy data, so they can then actively come up with meaningful energy reduction targets. This is something that we're sitting on a focus group or subcommittee for currently with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission to explore if this program would be feasible on a regional scale. In terms of water, as of right now, we don't have any data on the current water usage in county buildings. It's not something that's been tracked long-term. So we want to collect baseline data and ensure that we have that meaningful background information. We're also looking to create new standards through design practices and other water reuse projects. Also making sure that our data is accessible and reporting is easy to find. So one action we have would be to report those findings back to this group, the Sustainability Commission, each year. We also want to ensure that we're collecting data. I duplicated, it looks like. And then finally, providing community education. So also showing members of the community how they can reduce water consumption as well. In terms of renewable energy sources, the county currently has solar arrays on its buildings. So we want to make sure that we're optimizing those. So first tracking the amount of energy we're getting from those, as well as ensuring that we have a strong maintenance plan so those solar panels can stay strong and produce solar energy throughout its lifetime. We also want to look to see if we can invest in additional renewable energy projects. And these largely touch on the strategies Fran had mentioned earlier. Through a lot of our energy work to date, we've also recognized that this is incredibly technical field that requires a lot of innovation and also expertise. So we're also making the recommendation of hiring an energy manager for Delaware County to oversee not only our energy procurement, but also our energy conservation measures long-term. In terms of our community projects, we're looking to promote existing community-based solar programs such as CPACE and Solarize, also providing community education and creating solar-ready communities through the promotion of the Sol Smart program. The county would also be seeking designation. And the last area is for emissions, and it looks like I just copied the same area. So in terms of emissions, it's very much like the other sections in which we would just be seeking to ensure the support of the other actions and tracking our emissions over time. So we do have some comments in the chat. I see IR technology exists to identify high polluters that may be useful. Also from Joe, recognizing that water consumption may be difficult to reduce as water conservation has been going on for a long time. Low flow shower heads, toilets, and faucets, and so many gains have been unrealized. It was also noted that in Delaware County, many of our buildings are going to be renovated to be ADA compliant, and we are looking to install many of these measures. Any other questions in terms of energy or water?
I'm wondering why we don't have at least, billing information on the annual use of county buildings.
We do
For
have
water?
that. We just have no way right now of collating that data. We have just brought on board a data coordinator who is actually reporting to Becca. And we just had a meeting this past week about how he will be able to collaborate with Aqua, with Pico, and actually get that data instead of in individual bills. We're going to have them provide that data to us so we can manipulate it, analyze it, and share it out. So David, you're on point. We have been receiving monthly bills for all of our buildings, but it's been just to pay those bills. It hasn't been to analyze that data. And so we don't want to have a data entry person do that. We want the actual utility companies to provide that to us electronically, which they can do. So that's what we're going to move forward to.
Absolutely. Thank you. Perfect.
Any other thoughts or questions? Not, I'm going to pass it back to Fran for zero waste.
All right, we are on focus area 5 of 6. We're almost there. So zero waste, as you know, we did go on a long process that has not been completed yet, but we're getting very close to have a zero waste plan for Delaware County, which is actually our 10-year municipal waste management plan requirement by the state. And of course, the number one thing we're trying to do here is achieve zero waste in Delaware County. Now, that is an aspirational goal, of course, but the way we'd like to get there is through our county operations, through county-wide interventions in which communities are doing things, and we want to also reduce the emissions from our waste, which goes along with just reducing waste in general. And so for Delaware County's operations, we want to achieve 50% diversion rate in county buildings in the next 5 years. And that will require us to implement a composting program in our cafeterias. We will be recycling. We're going to have a very robust recycling program in all of our county-owned buildings. And Becca's going to talk about that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump into actions. So I just don't want to go too deep into this because we are going to be issuing a zero waste plan, and that's going to be very in-depth. And a lot of the folks on this call on the commission and were participants in that process. And the same target is for our communities and residential. And then for reducing emissions, we want to reduce scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by 20% over 5 years from our 2019 baseline.
So in terms of zero waste, recognizing that we broke out our actions in county operations as well as in the community. So in county operations, we recognize there's a lot of opportunity to create zero waste policies in terms of procurement as well as existing paper usage, signatures, and other policies. We also recognize that currently in county buildings, there's not one straight recycling program across all county buildings. And those structures that do exist are not very strong. So we're looking to completely kind of overhaul our recycling program in all county buildings. Also recognizing that in addition to having the infrastructure, we also need to shift the culture towards zero waste. So first and foremost, we're recommending the passing of a Delaware County Zero Waste Resolution by County Council, and also looking at our additional powers that county government can take for all of our communities in terms of zero waste. Finally, we would be looking to secure funding and hosting public events. So as you guys know, we're a Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful affiliate. So we would be hosting 5 events per year, and then finally applying for grants. In terms of community-wide actions, I'm not going to go into these too in depth, simply because we took the strategies identified from the 10-year municipal solid waste plan and incorporated those into our plan, recognizing that we had a strong team of experts working to identify what the county should be doing on a community level for that. So high level, some of the kind of topic areas include the county doing leadership by example, so implementing reuse and recycling programs in our communities, also encouraging universal collection, which is recognizing that all properties must offer recycling and composting collection. Other strategies included tackling the construction material reuse and recycling, as this is one of the largest sources of waste across the country. And then finally, developing local capacities for processing organics and recyclables. So again, really ensuring that we have the infrastructure for our municipalities and our communities to be having access to different kinds of waste removal at all stages. The last thing we had in this area, similar to that of transportation and buildings, is our emissions. So just recognizing that all of the other actions we've identified are really going to contribute toward the reduction of emissions, but other things we have to do are ensuring that we're tracking those baselines and quantifying the emission reductions from the actions we're implementing. So with that, any questions on zero waste?
Well, as usual, I've got one. It occurs to me that you may be working at cross purposes with that target of the 50% diversion rate, because to the degree that you reduce waste altogether by buying less, using less, you are reducing your numbers on your diversion rate. So you might, rather than look at a diversion rate, you might look at the amount of trash, regular solid waste not diverted, compared to the baseline period. And so we achieve our goals both by diverting and by not using.
I think that's a really good point. So we chose the 50% diversion rate because through the zero waste plan, it was recognized if we implement all of these strategies, we should have 90% diversion by the end of the 10-year cycle. So we just kind of halved that and decided on 50% in 5 years. But I think you do make a good point about measuring the actual kind of tonnage of trash to also show that people are reducing rather than just diverting as well.
And that's part of the calculation for the diversion rate is, so we will have that data. It's basically dividing what we're generating by how we're diverting it.
Right, and both numbers are meaningful.
Absolutely. We'll make sure we share both of those, all of that.
Awesome, thank you. We're gonna also go to health and wellness then.
Thank you. Our last focus area, and once again, the listing and numbers doesn't mean that any one of these is more important than the other. We want to make sure that we create safe and healthy environments to live, work, play, and thrive. And that means through air, water, food, and the overall well-being of our residents. With air, we want to ensure that we have just and equitable access to clean, clear, and healthy air. And our target is to engage community members in all 49 municipalities in the next 5 years to increase awareness and understanding of the impacts of air quality on health. Once again, this is something that we can influence. We don't really have control over the emissions that are, from each municipality through the industry that's there, but we can do our best to educate community members about what this means and how it impacts the quality of health. Water, we want to ensure just and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water and also water for recreation, so that every child has the ability to swim during the summertime when it's hot, very, very hot. And so we would like to, the target is educate 100% of community members on the importance of water for health and wellness over the next 5 years. So we'll be reporting out on that. And our baseline is right now 0. We don't know how many, we have not started educating our community members on this. So we are starting from 0. For food, we want to ensure just and equitable access to healthy, nutritious, appealing, and locally grown food. The target is to increase the number of healthy food offerings in food deserts by 20% over 5 years. Of course, we have to identify where those food deserts are. And of course, they're probably in the marginalized, underserved communities. And then overall well-being. We want to improve the overall physical and mental health and well-being for every resident, visitor, everyone in Delaware County. And the target is to adopt 100% of Delaware County Health Department programs as they are developed over the next 5 years. And you may know that there are maternal health programs, environmental health programs coming out of our newly formed health department. And we want to make sure that all of that is adopted. And as Becca said earlier, we have partners and lead agencies. That is the lead agency here. And we will be working closely with them to report this information out annually for you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Fran. So as mentioned in the area of air, just recognizing that air quality is the enforceability of that is on a state level. So in looking at the things Delaware County can be doing, first, we want to ensure that we're improving communication and data sharing. Through our focus area process, we learned that a lot of the communities that are currently housing monitors do not have easy access to the data that's coming from them. So our first 4 actions are really seeking to improve the quality of the data we're receiving, but also ensuring that that's accessible to our communities. Next, we want to set county policies and create models for cleaner air. So looking at things like anti-idling policies, model ordinances for some hazardous chemicals like lead, asbestos, or mold testing in buildings, also looking at indoor air quality standards. Our last kind of section for actions is acknowledging the existing conditions and empowering people through education. So we want to ensure that our residents feel empowered to take a stance against the conditions in which they're subjected to, and ensure that they know the proper channels to address their concerns with. Next, in terms of water, this is looking at water from a health perspective. I know water was also touched on in energy and efficiencies, as well as natural resources, but this is strictly looking at it from a consumptive and recreational use. So first, looking at monitoring water quality in Delaware County. So this is something that's done at a state level, but we want to ensure that we're actively working with the state and know who to contact if any of our communities are identifying issues. Next is increasing education about healthy hydration. So again, ensuring that our communities are aware of the importance of water in a normal diet, as well as how they should be getting that and what they should be looking at to make sure the water out of their tap is safe. Finally, it's looking at providing awareness for safe water-based recreation. Steve, before I move on, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, about water, water testing. Is there any, I know a lot of people are concerned about PFAS and things like that in water. Is there any component where Delco could be testing for PFAS, lead, and other things as well?
So that's one of the actions. We didn't identify PFAS specifically, but we did identify the action of completing water testings in homes and schools for lead and other harmful chemicals. So ensuring that we can help provide that service.
Just adding that we are depending upon the water service providers to do testing, and we can influence that by demanding or, pushing, advocating for the testing that you're talking about.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know that's on a lot of people's minds now.
It is.
Thank you.
Sure, and to your point, so we're mainly serviced by the Chester Water Authority and Aqua in Delaware County, and they do put out annual reports, but a couple of our actions include reviewing the annual water quality reports on a county level and ensuring that our members of the public know where to find those things, because it can be tricky, and also identifying key contacts at our water providers. So if we do have to have those conversations about concerns, we know exactly who to go to and already have those relationships established, as where that's not necessarily the case right now on a broader scale.
Speaking of communications, it occurs to me that perhaps there's another matter that we could intervene with Aqua on. We've had a lot of Aqua work here in Media Borough, and it's a lot's been going on all around the county. And well, they're improving service and all of that, and that's all to the good. But what we've discovered is that there is a lot of stuff that gets flushed through the pipes during the process. We ourselves had a problem last summer when our whole house water filter just completely clogged up one day to the point where we had essentially no water. But it turned out that it was a good thing, because all of that stuff could have eaten like a washing machine, as it did to one of our neighbors, or dishwasher, or any other appliance that uses water. So, I find that Aqua, at least, and I suspect anybody else who's doing this kind of work, is not adequately communicating with customers about the risks of stuff that comes through the pipes. And, this was just sediment, but who knows what else was coming through along with that sediment. It's just perhaps a matter of concern for the county.
I think that's a great point. I think that's really why we're seeking to identify who these key contacts are and really building those relationships to ensure that the county also knows what's happening. So we can also kind of ensure that our residents are getting that information, at least from two sources, Aqua as well as the county, just to make sure that everybody is aware what's going on rather than after the fact. We also have a comment in the chat from Joe, just recognizing the consideration of installing rainwater runoff capture at large areas of non-permeable surface areas, such as school parking lots, for example. This would directly help an area like Darby. I think that's a great suggestion, and we do talk about green stormwater infrastructure in our natural resources section as well. So the next, the big brunt of actions here is also looking at healthy food. So first, recognizing we need to identify the need areas in Delaware County. So looking at our existing food disbursement programs, as well as the existing offerings, to ensure that all communities have equal access to healthy foods. Next is also promoting nutrition and ensuring healthy food access for all. So really promoting nutrition, as well as expanding offerings for programs like SNAP, GooSNP, or WIC at farmers markets. So folks that utilize those programs have another opportunity to use them for healthy options. Next is then looking at creating community gardens and collaborating with local farmers. So we look at a variety of different kinds of actions here, whether it's for local farms, community gardens, LSAs, or just other local food production. So ensuring that we're building technical assistance as well as capacity for those forms of healthy food production. Other actions in the area of healthy food include fostering conversations around food access. So as we learned through our process, there are actually a lot of groups that work on healthy food in the area, but we also learned that not all of them know what the other groups are working on. So really fostering conversations for cross collaboration to ensure that we are suiting the needs of our residents and making the best use of resources across all kinds of groups. And finally, ensuring space for food production. So how can we use zoning regulations, or other projects to ensure that land is being set aside for local food production. And I will say, you'll note in number 25, there's an option for adopting the Greening on Orange pilot project. This was something that was brought forward by a group of media residents of looking at converting county-owned land that was being underutilized on Orange Street for local farming. So in having this action, it goes larger than that, of also just the opportunity of looking at county lands to see where we can take underutilized parcels and reserve them specifically for local food production. So the last area is just the overall health and well-being. And as Fran noted, so our Delaware County Health Department is a new department. It just had its 1-year anniversary. So we want to ensure that while we are thinking of the overall health and well-being, that we're aligning with the initiatives of this department as they're kind of getting their feet under them. So with that, happy to take any questions. See a great stat in the chat from Carol that also just promotes vegan diets, or plant-based diets rather. Any other thoughts in terms of health and well-being? Alrighty. Well, thank you all for your feedback and thoughts. That was a lot to take in all at once. That's why we highly encouraged folks to look at these ahead of time, but we greatly appreciate all of your comments and your time taking to review these. Any feedback really does just help elevate our plan. So I'm going to go over this super quickly because I know we're a bit behind on our agenda at this point, but I wanted to share with you what we also learned from the general public during our open houses. And I will say I'm happy to make these slides available so everyone can kind of look and digest at their own pace as well. So overall for this plan, how we got here today, as you know, we did a community prioritization study in 2021. We did the focus area subcommittees for 9 months between August and March of 2023. Then we held internal stakeholder meetings. And finally, we had our open houses over the past couple of weeks. So in these open houses, as many of you know through your own attendance, participants had a brief presentation about the sustainability plan, and then were able to review the kind of large scale goals, targets, and strategies and place dots in correspondence to specific feedback they had. So some of the findings that we were able to find through this, first in the area of climate resiliency, recognizing that feedback was very evenly distributed in terms of which strategies were most effective in climate hazards and infrastructure. Comments also identified the larger need for action in vulnerable communities, and flooding was the by far largest concern for folks in terms of climate hazards. We also found that in the area of the green economy, there was a large interest, and I apologize, I can fix this before I share it, in supporting new businesses over kind of defining green jobs. In terms of natural resources, we asked folks to identify what they felt was the greatest impact on the environment, and tree canopy and native plantings were seen as the priority. Also, open space was close behind though. We also had many comments from folks stating that they had a desire to maintain open spaces as they are. So for example, if the county or a municipality or another group acquires land, keep it as it is. So if it's a farm, keep it as a farm. If it's woods, keep it as woods. A lot of people really just wanted to see that continuity of space. Finally, through our comments, there was a big emphasis on maintenance and stewardship, in addition to planting new native plants. In transportation, we asked folks what sub-goals they were most interested in seeing implemented in their community, that being walking, biking, transit, or EVs. And transit was actually the most popular, which I was surprised by. But respondents were also very excited about the potential of more walking and biking in the community. Comments showed that there was some uncertainty over EVs and reinforced our recognition of the need for greater education in this area. Finally, most comments were also regarding the need for safety improvements, including improved lighting, shrubbery, and intersections for walking and biking. In terms of energy and efficiency, we had asked respondents how comfortable they were in each of our kind of sub goals. So how much did they feel they knew in terms of energy, water conservation, and renewable energy? And we did see a bell curve in all of our responses. So it was very similar trend across all areas. So most folks recognized that they understood a little bit about the topics, but still had a lot to learn. They also shared some of the biggest concerns were in terms of affordability and requested the provision of resources to assist in affordability constraints. Water conservation was identified as a lower priority than energy. And finally, assistance to getting solar on multifamily dwellings was another trend. In terms of zero waste, we asked which of the strategies identified they felt would have the greatest impact. And we recognized folks thought that shifting culture and developing local capacities for recycling and organics would have the biggest impact on zero waste in our community. Through our comments, we also saw there was a big need to explain how the municipal solid waste plan and the sustainability plan are working together. In just reading the goals, targets, and actions, folks weren't really seeing how they went hand in hand, but luckily that's something that we can address in our narrative component. We also saw a lot of comments around the emphasis of reduction rather than just diversion, much like David said today. And finally, there was a need for increased access to recycling. In terms of health and wellness, we saw lots of different action or feedback, but again, they were looking to identify which strategies they felt would have the large impact on improving health. And one of the biggest trends that was apparent was there was a tremendous interest in water quality monitoring. This is also important to just recognize that this is probably due to the fact that the chemical spill in the Delaware River happened while we were hosting our open houses. And that trend and the kind of concern of residents was very apparent in their voting. Some other interesting things we found out in terms of overall well-being, we had 2 comments bringing up noise and noise ordinances throughout Delaware County for overall well-being. And finally, through our comments, we found that there were differing opinions on organization for local food production, whether farms are the answer or the community gardens or LSAs. But regardless of the strategy, everyone was in large support of the initiatives. And the last big takeaways from our comments that I wanted to share were comments were generally supportive and positive around our sustainability plan. People seemed very impressed, even when offering critical recommendations. Next, there were several comments on the need for an emphasis in equitable implementation. So just recognizing that we need to ensure that we're diverting our resources to our most vulnerable communities. There was also recommendations for making our goals more ambitious in certain areas. And then lastly, there was an expressed need for additional background information and definitions, which was understandable as our respondents were not provided with the narrative components of the plan. So last, I'm going to pass it back to Fran for strategy for implementation and the final next steps.
Before we do that, I just want to give you a huge shout out for the amount of effort you put into organizing those public meetings and for truly listening to people and breaking down all of that data the way you did. I think we should all be really appreciative of that. I'm just that's the first time I've seen that because you know, we didn't have a lot of time, but Becca, that was an amazing job and you really are listening. So the strategy for implementation is that we have things that the county controls. So we're going to build that into our operating budget, our capital budget. So our facilities, waste and fleet, we're going to operationalize these things. We want to do some fundraising. We mentioned Gretchen is on board now to help us with the fundraising strategy and grants. We're trying to find out if we can do grants, partnerships. So what the county controls, influences, it educates. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to go into the details. You can get the gist of it. Becca.
Sure, so the last is our next steps.
So Becca and I are working together on putting together the narrative component of this plan. We are also going to have 2 case studies per section, per focus area. So we can have some photographs and stories. Graphic designers coming on board, as I mentioned in the beginning. So we will make this plan come to life. We'll have a soft release at the conference on June 8th, and then we're going to begin a fundraising campaign, and hopefully we'll be able to fund all of these initiatives.
So that's it.
Woohoo! We
That was a
did
lot.
it. We did it.
Thank you for hanging in there, everyone.
And that's absolutely amazing. Francine and Becca, just thank you both for all of your commitment and all of your amazing work. And I know you'll give credit to like other people providing feedback and everything, and I know that's true, but just thank you for all of your work on this. It's absolutely amazing. What an exciting time for Delaware
It
County,
really
and they're
is.
making it possible. So
It really is. It is the sustainable. So Delaware. Anyway, that was interesting. As I give a shout out to everybody, county council. If it
It's
wasn't
spring.
yeah, there you go. So county council was the force that behind the transition team, and then for the commission, you guys being formed, the Sustainability Commission, we have to give a shout out to county council. Without them, we would not be able to be here today. So I'm going to stop with that. It's Friday at 4 o'clock. Goodbye.
Are we permitted to go a little bit past 4 and continue with the agenda? Okay.
I believe
all right.
so. Yes.
Are there any questions for Becca and Francine? I know we've been having questions throughout, but okay. All right, I guess we'll continue with the agenda then. Let me just share my screen. Actually, public comment is next. Is there any public comment?
There's nothing in the email.
Okay, all right. We'll go on to the next item on the agenda. Review action items from the last meeting. Becca, did you want to say anything about the meet the members?
Sure. So just a reminder, folks, we had sent out a survey last time. We're looking to highlight all of you on our social media. So if you have not done that already, please fill that survey out at your earliest convenience. And I'm happy to resend that link at the end of this meeting. In terms of Earth Day activities, please sign up. I'll resend the link for that as well, but we're doing a cleanup in Clayton Park on April 22nd from 9 till 11. And then the last item, Keep Delco Beautiful. I just wanted to update you. I know we had mentioned potentially having a subcommittee last time. I've taken your feedback into consideration, and I'm going to reach out to some of the other groups, such as the watershed groups, maybe the Parks Department, Friends of groups, and see if we can get at least one representative from kind of all those different entities that are already doing cleanups. And I'm happy to send out those different groups that we're looking for representation in, if you guys know anybody.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Becca. Are there any questions for Becca? Okay. The next item on the agenda is new business. Does anyone have any new business? No. Okay. Hearing none. Go on to the next item on the agenda. Is set action items for the next meeting. I know like people had a lot of questions and comments about the sustainability plan, so I just noted a couple of those. But other than that, I didn't have any action items in general. Becca or Francine, did you have any action items in general on your?
Yes, Carol, if you you had said you would send the Menti answers from today.
Oh, yes, thank you, yes.
And then if everyone, as Fran mentioned in her CSO update, if you have any recommendations to fill our last speaking spot, if you have someone that's really inspiring, that you would like to hear speak at our sustainability conference, please send us an email with that recommendation. And those were the last two I had.
Thank you, Becca.
I just want to add that the next step is for us to share with you guys the final draft, I think at our next meeting, Becca, of the plan that will include narrative. Hopefully, we'll get to that point where we're hoping that we'll have the plan completed by the next meeting for your review, because we want to bring it to county council after you guys approve it, to share with them the final version for their either approval or just, okay.
Mhm. Okay, wonderful. There's, I guess, public comment again. Is there any public comment? No, okay. All right, with that, we're just up to adjourning. So, if there are any other comments, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll move, we adjourn.
Okay, thanks, David. Is there someone who would like to second that?
I'll second it. Ed McGargy.
Thanks, Ed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so moved. Our meeting today is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Thanks, Carol. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Take care, guys.